So we're looking at equivalent fractions. Now this should be really easy. We've kind of been doing this, but this is just, it's part of your curriculum. We've got to make sure we cover it specifically. So there's two ways that we can find an equivalent fraction. So let's say I were to give you 1/2. And I ask you to find a fraction that is equivalent. What does the word equivalent kind of sound like?
Same as, or like equal to.
Equal to. Equivalent kind of sounds like the word equal. So we're finding a fraction that it's a different fraction, but it has the same value. That's kind of like when we looked at decimals. 6/100 was equivalent to what? 6/10 could be equivalent to 60/100, right?
And 600,000.
So the value is the same, just the way that we write it is different. So how could we find an equivalent fraction for 1/2?
Times 2/4.
So we can multiply the numerator and the denominator by the same number. That's the key. You can't multiply them by different numbers. You have to do the same number. Now you can do any number that you want. When you're finding equivalent fractions, there's really no, if it just says, tell me an equivalent fraction, there's really no set number that you have to use. Sometimes you might be asked to find multiple equivalent fractions. So it might say, find 3 equivalent fractions for the one that you're given. So you could choose to multiply by any number. We could multiply times 2, and that would give us 2/4. But we could go back and we can multiply by 3 if we wanted to, and that would give us 3/6. These are both equivalent to 1/2. Now if I were to do a little picture, doesn't have to be perfect, just 2 rectangles that are the same width. Let's say I wanted to model 1/2. How many pieces would I need to divide this one into?
1/2. Oh, 2.
Yeah, the denominator tells us how many pieces we have, so there'd be 2 pieces. I'd split it right down the middle. And I have 1/2, so I would just shade in one of them. Right, do we agree that this shows me 1/2? Michelle, you writing this down? So what if I wanted to show 2/4? How many pieces would I need to divide it into? 4 pieces. So again, I'm going to cut it in half first and then cut those halves in half. And I'm going to shade in 2 out of 4 pieces. Would we say that these are equivalent?
Yes.
That they look the same?
Yes.
Yeah.
Just in different pieces. Yeah.
It's the same fraction, the same part of a whole, just represented differently. Okay? So we saw this one method we can use to find equivalent fractions by multiplying by whatever number. But what's the key that you have to remember?
Simplify.
You multiply the numerator and denominator by the same number. You can't do 1 times 3 and 2 times 4. Okay? They have to be the same. Alright? There's another way that we can find equivalent fractions. So what if I give you 2/6? I can't say that. 2/6.
6.
How can I simplify, or what could I do, kind of gave it away, what can I do to find an equivalent fraction? I can simplify. So instead of multiplying by a number, what can I do?
Divide.
I could divide. What would I divide by?
2.
Yeah, I'm going to divide the numerator and denominator by 2. 2 divided by 2 would give me 1. 6 divided by 2 would give me 3. Now we know that a fraction is in simplest form when we can't divide anymore, right? If we can't divide 1 or 3 or the numerator and denominator by anything. So that would be as far as we can go, but 2/6 and 1/3 are equivalent fractions. Okay? What if I had 3/4? Can I simplify that to find an equivalent fraction?
No.
No, because it's already in simplest form. So what's the only other way I could find an equivalent fraction? I would need to multiply. What if I gave you 7/8? Can I simplify to find an equivalent fraction? No, what would I have to do? Multiply. What if I gave you 15/18?
You could divide.
I could divide by what? Yeah, I could divide by 3. So 15 divided by 3 would give me 5. 18 divided by 3 would be 6. So one way that you may be able to go about this, if it's asking you to find 3 equivalent fractions. Let's say you started with 15 over 18. Now, from the beginning, you could go ahead and just multiply by 2, by 3, by 4, but it might be a little bit easier to start by simplifying it. There's your first equivalent fraction, and then we could just take this one and then we can multiply by 2, and then multiply by 4, and we're working with a lot more easy numbers. But that's really up to you. If the fraction is already in its simplest form, what's your only option? To multiply. Okay? Let me give you some examples. I'm going to give you 3. Oh, you can't see that. Okay, I want you to find 3 equivalent fractions for each of those examples. Find 3 equivalent fractions for each example.
So you don't simplify?
You could. Depending on the fraction, you get to decide how you find your equivalent fractions. And you can pick easy numbers. You don't have to use crazy big numbers. We're looking for 3 different fractions that are still equivalent to our original. Okay, I'm working some out as well. As soon as I've got mine, we can look at them together. Alright, let's see if you got the same thing. So, with this first one, with 2/3, can we simplify that one at all? No, it's already in simplest form, right? So our only option would be to multiply. I just kept it simple. I started by multiplying by 2, then by 3, then by 4. With 8/12, what could I do first?
You can simplify like,
I could simplify. Yeah, I could divide by 4, so I could get 2/3. Now, I actually didn't do what I said you could do, but you could have taken 2/3 and then found some different equivalent fractions, but I just took the original, I multiplied by 2, I multiplied by 3. And then with number 3, you could have done the same thing. Simplify it first, and then look for other fractions that are equal. Okay? Pretty simple, right? Any questions on that?